where the West begins in Fort Worth, Texas, to around the globe. You are listening to Talk in the Night. Later on in the show tonight, I'm going to be joined by my guest, Jennifer Noel Taylor, as we talk about her new book, Spiritual and Broke. We're going to talk about how to stop struggling with money and live your purpose. But first, up on the Talk in the Night website, despite strong economy, many Americans struggle to make ends meet. Despite a strong economy, about 40% of American families struggled to meet at least one of their basic needs last year, including paying for food, health care, housing, or utilities. That according to an Urban Institute survey of nearly 7,600 adults that found that the difficulties were most prevalent among adults with lower incomes or health issues, but it also revealed that people from all walks of life were running into similar hardships. The finding issued Tuesday by the nonprofit research organization highlight the financial strains experienced by many Americans in an otherwise strong economy. The average unemployment rate for 2017 was 4.4%, a low that followed years of decline. But having a job doesn't ensure families will be able to meet their basic needs, said Michael Cartman, one of the study's authors. Among the households with at least one working adult, more than 30% reported hardships. And of course, you can read more of that story up on the Talk of the Night website by clicking on the USA Today link. So let's talk about this and much more with my guest, Jennifer. Welcome to the show.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Okay. So my name's Jennifer, and I've spent the last 16 years of my life running a business called Quantum Touch, which we teach energy medicine workshops around the world. And for people who may not be familiar with energy medicine uses what's called chi or prana or life force energy to facilitate healing. And our fundamental belief is that everything in the world is energy, and that with the right frequency of energy, anything's possible, so that the reality matches the frequency of energy that you're projecting into the world. So that's our fundamental philosophy. And so we teach you how to use that energy to facilitate healing. And before my life as a business owner of Quantum Touch, I got a degree in computer science and started and wrote software for a few companies doing retail software and so forth. And that's basically a nutshell summary of what I've been doing professionally over the last 20 odd years. And and then in my free time, I like to do the flying trapeze, the high flying trapeze.
Wow.
Yeah.
Busy woman. All right. I'm busy myself. I work a day job and do this radio show at night. Plus, I'm also with this show, I'm not only the host, but I'm also the show's producer, the booking agent, the webmaster. I do all the stuff for the show. So briefly tell the listeners a little bit about your new book, Spiritual and Broke.
So my new book is going to be launched sometime early next year. And basically, it's a response to something that I noticed with a lot of my friends and a lot of people in our community, is that people are doing what they love. They're pursuing their life purpose. They're feeling guided to make a difference in the world. And yet so many of these people were also struggling with money. And it also grew out of my own story, where when I quit my job as a software developer to do energy medicine, I ended up going into debt by the tune of about $135,000. So, so I ended up being able to turn that all around, I got out of debt. I saved a bunch of money. And so I decided to write a book about it in hopes that other people can turn their situation around as well.
Okay. So what really, I mean, you kind of mentioned it there, but what led to you writing this book?
Well, it's so heart-wrenching to see people who really want to make a difference, and I felt the same way. It was just really hard to think like, wow, I'm really wanting to make a difference in the world. And for me, it was energy medicine, but for some people, it's coaching or doing some other form of healing, or even doing artwork, or whatever it is. And yet, just that, struggling to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck, it's really stressful. Even 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and are just, everyone's really struggling. And it's just really hard to see, as well as when you're the one struggling with money like that, it's really, really stressful.
Oh, yeah. I know all about that.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved here to Fort Worth, Texas, I kind of moved on a whim. I just said, I'm done with California. I'm tired of the way the pace of life is, the high cost of living and everything like that. And I said, I'm just going to take my tax refund and move to Texas and hope everything turns out all right. So I ended up spending 3 months in a homeless shelter for veterans until I got a job and saved up some money to where I could, with the help of organization, if I can talk tonight, okay, forget it. I'm not going to even try and say it anymore. But with their help, I was able to get an apartment and everything like that. And, of course, now that I'm, like that news story that I read, that people with low incomes or health issues are the ones kind of struggling even in this boosted economy. And I know for me, I got health issues myself. I don't let it get me down, but it takes a strain on the mental and physical body as well. So did you kind of see that or use that kind of thought when writing that book?
Mm-hmm. Well, for many people, if you're struggling with money, just that feeling of stress that you can't make ends meet, or even debt feels really stressful, because this feeling that you'll never pay it off. There's, because your interest, let's say you have, like in my case, I had $35,000 of credit card debt. The interest was almost $800 a month. That's an apartment for a lot of people. Yeah. So when you're in that amount of debt and your interest is that high, it feels hopeless. It feels like, at least I felt hopeless, like there's no way this is ever going to turn around. It's impossible. And when people feel like something in their life is impossible, that's when depression sets in. That's when, for some people, suicide, because there seems to be no way out. It can wreak havoc with your health and relationships, because when you don't see a way out, it kind of, you get into that mindset of what's the point. And I think a lot of people are just, that feeling of being stuck, like, I don't know how to fix this. And, for people living paycheck to paycheck, there's this idea of like, there's no way I can ever fix this. Kind of what's the point? And yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I know I've fallen into this trap before, and stuff like that, where if you're struggling because your job's not paying enough, or your health is affecting, you're working and everything like that, you can't make it to work because you're sick or something like that, and it just puts that strain on you. So a lot of people actually turn to like these high interest payday loans just to help pay the bills, and then they just get stuck in that perpetual cycle of rewriting the loans just to pay off that other loan, and you add more to it, and it just keeps adding up.
It just compounds because a huge interest payment, that's just a big portion of money for a lot of people, and then you have to borrow more money to pay down the interest on your debt. So now you're borrowing money just to pay interest down. That's really hard. And for people who are doing those, that's super challenging.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it took me a while to get out of that mess and everything like that. And I think what kind of helped me was that whole change of lifestyle from California to Texas, because it just, even though it's a lower cost of living here in Texas, it's also a lot lower cost of what you make at a job. And if you work like a minimum wage job, it's hard to actually make ends meet. But sometimes you can't get those good paying jobs unless you have that degree or something like that. And I think a while back I read something where even that degree doesn't guarantee you that high paying job.
Yeah, I think that it's a conundrum for many people with rising housing costs and low pay. It's really a conundrum for a lot of people.
Yeah, and of course those that have just got out of school or going to school and they're paying off student loans, it's just that perpetual cycle of I'm working the job to pay for the student loan, but there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get that job after you get that degree. So that could cause stress on people. What do? I got this degree, but I can't find nothing to help me pay off these student loans, and they end up taking these minimum wage jobs and everything like that just to kind of basically living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a conundrum for a lot of people, just barely making it. And then, the other problem with that is if you have no savings and you're just barely making it, what do you do when your car breaks down or you have an emergency or some unexpected expense? Where do you draw the funds for that? And I think that's also very stressful for people.
All right. So how do you use the law of attraction, or how does the law of attraction play a part in your book?
Okay, so let's look at the law of attraction. First, let's look at how it's typically defined. The law of attraction usually states that we attract into our lives what we're a match for. So if we're depressed all the time, for example, we're more likely to attract more things that we're depressed about. And so what happened with a lot of the stuff with the law of attraction, the idea is that, well, your thoughts generate the reality. And so it has been this whole thing about, well, if you think abundant thoughts, you'll have abundance. And I personally found that didn't work very well. I did a lot of mantras and tried to think, positive thoughts, and I didn't find that the abundance actually showed up. So in my book, I dig a little deeper into the law of attraction with the question of why is it that thinking thoughts alone didn't really change my reality? Why did doing mantras or doing affirmations, why didn't my reality actually change when I tried all that? Now, I don't know if that's been your experience, so that was my experience with the idea.
I've never
right?
had any problem or any success with that either. I mean, just trying to think about having a better life. I mean, now I do use like meditation, like even when I'm struggling, I'll just take that quiet time to sit by myself, listen to meditation music, and it just helps calm me down, but it doesn't solve the situation. It just kind of releases that stress that is there for a short, brief time.
So and that was been my experience. Sure, we can meditate, but or think positive thoughts or do affirmations, but it didn't change my bank account. So I started scratching my head because I feel like the law of attraction is a real law, but how does that law of attraction really work? And that's one of the questions that I dive into in my book. And what I've come to the conclusion is that the law of attraction is based on the energy that we're projecting into the universe, and that's the energy and essence of who we are. And that involves a lot of different things beyond just your thoughts. Your thoughts are a part of it, but it involves your emotional energy, your unconscious beliefs and conscious beliefs, your spiritual path, and a lot of what's really going on in your heart. Your negative beliefs, lack of forgiveness, like this whole kind of jumble of different energies that are going on in your heart. That's what you're projecting into the universe, and that's how you attract your reality. So I really get into this in my book because this explains to me why affirmations weren't working, because I wasn't going deep enough. I wasn't shifting fundamentally what was going on within me in my energy field. And that's where why I was not attracting a lot more money with just affirmations.
Yeah, because I know I've had guests on my show talking about how to attract money using mind powers. And I think he talked about some of that kind of stuff with not just thinking about it, but also saying or putting that energy out, as you said, to actually bring that into you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've really noticed among people who are struggling, and it's not everyone, but I've noticed that this idea that they don't have any ability to shift it. Like on some level, if I dig deep enough with people, there's this feeling that they're a victim. That they're a victim to either the IRS or their job or the housing costs or for some it's even God. Like, why is God doing this to us? Or why does a loving God allow this to happen? And that victim thing, feeling like some people feel like a martyr for their cause. And in my book, I dive into this a lot because I believe that's one of the biggest blocks to abundance for a lot of people, is feeling on some level, and sometimes it goes pretty deep, but having on some level this feeling that they're a victim. Because the victim
mentality.
thing. Yeah, and the victim mentality projects an energy that's really incompatible with abundance. So that's just something to take a look at. And I've noticed it with a lot of people who are struggling. I did that a lot too. I felt like a victim to my cause because I had this belief that, well, I'm doing what I love, the money should come. But the money never came. So then I blamed God. I blamed the universe. I blamed spirit. I found something to blame. And that was the one thing that was really blocking abundance to me before.
Yeah. Now, with like my show, I've been doing my radio show off and on for 7 years. Things have set me back to where I couldn't do it, and I had to restart it again. And that's what I restarted here back in October, because I had spent 6 months trying to get on my feet here once I got here to Fort Worth. So, or not 6 months. Let's see. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, actually, about 7 months before I restarted my show after moving here to Fort Worth. And it was basically, let me get on my feet first, and then I can focus on the radio show. Now, of course, my thinking is, okay, I can make a lot of money doing this radio show, but I know that at the same time, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to will that money into my bank account or anything like that. I know it's going to take time to build that listenership up, once again, that I had previously. And to get those advertisers to bring in that money, I have to get the listenership up. So it's taking it step by step. And what I'm taking from what you're saying about your book, it's that step-by-step guide that people need to take to get that abundance, that law of attraction.
Well, okay, so I'll throw this out there just for fun. There's this idea, and it may be possible, that with the right energy, something could materialize out of thin air. Is it possible, for example, that I have a thought and I'm such a match for that vibrationally that $100 bill would just materialize out of thin air? Now, that could be possible. I mean, theoretically, if everything is energy, like people suggest, that could be possible. However, I won't claim that I'm proficient at that by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
I have never been able to move objects across the room with my mind or do anything like that. So, given that's where I'm at, I think that I believe theoretically I could be sitting in my room right now and $1 million could get deposited in my bank account out of nowhere, because the reality could be that fluid. However, never gotten that to work. So, I recommend taking more of perhaps a approach that where we do acknowledge that everything can be fluid, and also recognizing that, well, we are where we at. I'm not proficient at manifesting things out of nowhere, so perhaps taking some, as you suggested, action steps on the physical is really important. So it's kind of this interesting blend between really recognizing that, yes, we are all energy, everything is fluid, anything can be attracted to me at any point, but then also recognizing that sometimes we need to take practical steps on the physical to manifest. And I think you said it really nicely. So it's a really interesting kind of blend. And I think a lot of us in the spiritual community really, we know it's possible, but we want to believe that we could just sit here and attract money just magically. And perhaps we can, but
well,
I have not figured that out yet. Yeah.
I was going to say, as a psychic, a lot of people have said over the years, not just to me, but about psychics in general, that they talk about people, psychics being wrong or stuff like that. And I mentioned that no psychic is ever going to be 100% right, because if we were, we would win the lotto every single time just because we get those numbers. But the point I'm getting to is, as far as, like me, I'm a light worker. I help other people with their with cleansing homes or helping people's energy kind of boost itself. To give you an example, there was a ghost investigation tour that we did out in Beverly Hills, and one woman went into this house where it had a darker energy to it, and she came out, as well as a few other people came out, feeling physically ill. But she was able to actually, her abilities were new to her, so she was feeling that extra pressure that most people wouldn't. And I took that positive energy that I had and told her to stand up, take a couple of deep breaths, and imagine the brightest white light that she could imagine. And just that whole power of thought and kind of not only just the thought of it, but just imagining it to trying to think of the right wording to say here, but just thinking of it and visualizing it helped her greatly and everything like that, to where she felt automatically better.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, the point I'm getting to with that is that basically what you're saying is not only thinking about, but putting that intention into it.
And I think it goes beyond that. So I believe that, let's say you want to manifest something, let's say $1,000 or whatever it is for people, whatever your goal is. So the universe always co-conspires to give you everything you want. So I believe that two things happen when you set an intent. The first thing is that it immediately manifests. Like you get $1,000 in the mail, or a friend pays you back, or on some level it just immediately manifests. The second possibility, which I think happens to a lot of people, is that it doesn't immediately manifest, but what does manifest is what's in the way of you creating what you want. So that's why I believe ask and you shall receive is 100% accurate. But for many of us, we discover what's in the way. So for example, if I say, let's up the stakes a little bit. Let's say I'd like $1 million by the end of 2019. Either that's going to happen, or I'm going to figure out very fast how I'm in the way of my own creation. And to me, that's kind of exciting, but it can also be really painful, because when you discover what's in the way, that can be really bringing up a lot of pain and suffering, because that's what we hold on to sometimes is trauma and pain and suffering and negative beliefs. And the universe will show us that by bringing forth, what's in our heart in the physical world. So I think it's a wonderful mechanism of the universe, but a lot of times when you ask for something, you'll notice, at least I noticed, that a lot of weird, maybe negative stuff shows up. And I'm like, well, what's that, universe? And it's because I'm not a match yet for what I really want.
Yeah, and of course, I'm a firm believer everything happens for a reason. So, I mean, if something like that showing you that obstacle in your path that's keeping you from getting this, I think it's a way of it showing you, okay, this is what you need to get over just before you can get to that point where you want what you're hoping to get.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. Yeah. So a lot of times these quote unquote negative things that happen in our lives are just the universe showing us, okay, this is where you need to let go. This is where you need to process your anger. This is where you need to shift yourself. And then let's say almost like a game of Tetris or whatever, then you progress to the next level and you get closer to what you want. So it's an amazing mechanism in the universe, but it also can be very challenging, for me too, for a lot of people, because of course we just want what we want without having to process all our stuff, You
want to be able to snap your fingers and here.
Yeah, here. So, yeah, but sometimes if stuff gets really deep, sometimes there's just a lot of childhood trauma and really heavy stuff, and it's we need to release that. That's how we're in the way, and universe always wants us to let that stuff go.
Yeah. All right, well, we're at the first commercial break of the night, but we'll be back with my guest Jennifer Noel Taylor as we talk about her book Spiritual and Broke. We'll be right back. For those on Santa's ghost hunting list, GhostStop.com has what you need to put that great gift under the tree. Right now in time for Christmas, GhostStop.com has a S-Box Ghost Scanner, new and now on sale for $69.95. Or how about something to stuff the stockings with by getting a laser grid scope for just $18.95. Just click on the banner ad at the top of the Talking Tonight website and get Christmas shopping today. GhostStop.com, your one-stop shop for all your ghost hunting needs. Do you have a paranormal team? Are you a small-time author? Do you have a radio show that you would like to promote? Is there anything that you would like to get the word out there about but don't have a big budget? Well, Talking Tonight has an opportunity for you to sponsor the show without breaking your wallet. Contact the show at talkingtonight@outlook.com or on the show's website or Facebook page for more details. For those on your Christmas list that love the paranormal and love to read by a fireplace, pick up a copy of Nicole Gaspard's book, Haunted Vessels and Cursed Objects. You can find the book on Amazon.com, on the Barnes & Noble website, or by clicking on the banner ad on the Talk of Night website. Pick up a copy for that book-reading, paranormal-loving fan.
There is something in the air, like I have to go nowhere. If someone ever asks me, I can never say where I will be. And people say that someday I will lose my mind. They're always wondering why is a waste of time. I am trying to figure why in my heart I still feel fire. Anything that has been done to fix it, or why it takes so long. Why it takes so long. Why it takes so long. Why it takes
Okay, and we are back with my guest, Jennifer Noel Taylor, as we talk about her book, Spiritual and Broke. Now, before the commercial break, we were talking about the law of attraction and everything like that, and talking about that the obstacles that sometimes we find that rather than what we want. Now, was there a particular obstacle before any of this ever happened that you saw in your way and said, I got to get past this?
Well, I've had tons of, let's call them, I like to call them dark miracles. Tons of situations that, seemed initially like just a real big obstacle, and then turned into a really positive thing. So I'll do an example that's been fairly recent, actually. With my business, we had a month or two where it slowed down a little bit. Quantum Touch, it was slow. It was a little slow, and I asked Spirit all that is. I said, hey, what's this about? Why is it slow? Why is this obstacle appearing? And how do I move beyond it? How do I use it for something good? And the answer I got back was it was an opportunity to work with a gap in our business that had been a gap for a long time, which was that we needed to develop more programs to help our instructors to be more successful with their businesses. So I took that to heart and I said, yeah, that would make sense. So in this case, that obstacle, what appeared to be a big pain, turned into an opportunity to say, hey, okay, I'm going to learn how to help our instructors build a better business. So I started implementing like instructor websites and other tools to help our instructors. So that's an example, a really recent one, of taking what seems huge problem and just using it as an opportunity to address an issue. And that's how I like to approach things now. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like I mentioned earlier about me spending 3 months in a homeless shelter, but that was actually an obstacle that was put in my way to say, okay, you hit bottom, there's only one way to go now, back up. And I took that obstacle as a learning lesson and said, okay, I'm not going to want to be here again. Let me move forward, get out of here, get situated, everything like that. And that's what I did. So I took that obstacle like, okay, I know I want to do this, and I know I've had plenty of people tell me I got the perfect voice for radio, so that's what I've stuck with. I've always had a passion for radio. That's what I want to do, but I know I'm not going to get there by just trying to will it to happen. It's just not going to happen. But you're right, with the obstacles in the way, sometimes you have to take that lesson and learn from it.
Yeah, it really interesting in my case because before that obstacle appeared, I had set the intent to triple our business. So I said, yeah, I'm ready to grow this business. I'm ready to triple the size. I want it to really grow now. So I set that intent a few months ago, and then all of a sudden it slowed down. My first response was like, well, I think the universe maybe misheard me. Let me repeat, I want to grow, and then I realized, wow, it put the obstacle in my path to show me what I needed to do to grow the business, which is help all of our instructors grow their own businesses. So it's really interesting sometimes when, like for your example, you set the intent, yes, I want to do radio, it's in my heart, I need to do it, and then you end up in a homeless shelter, and the recognition of the brilliance of the universe to orchestrate that, because that hitting that rock bottom, it sounds like, inspired you to really get moving with your show. Is that right?
Well, like I said, I did it for off and on for 7 years, but I was doing it more of a hobby, or when I started out, it was more of a hobby than anything. But I always had that feeling that, because I'm always that person that is wanting to help others, but sometimes you have to stop and say, okay, I got to help myself first before I can help others. Again, another obstacle there. It's spirit saying, slow down. You're going to get there. It's just you got to take time to focus on yourself.
I think that's something else. That's a whole interesting can of worms there that you bring up, because I think a lot of people in the healing field do what I call a martyr or self-sacrificial type of energy. Feeling like a martyr for the cause, or that I'm sacrificing myself to help others. And I've seen that a lot. And I think ultimately it's really hard to help others when you're suffering yourself. So as you suggested, the universe was asking you to focus on helping yourself first. And I think that's really important for a lot of people in the healing fields to remember, is that when we're feeling strong and healthy and inspired, that's when we're most able to serve others.
Yeah. Now, in this book, who is this book meant to help? Is there certain people, or is it meant to help everybody? And why is it a practical guide for them?
So basically, I wrote the book for people who are in the healing arts, like quantum touch or a coaching practice, or in your case, doing shows, or for anyone who has a really strong mission to serve others. And it was geared towards people who are doing their mission yet really struggling for money. And that's my audience I wrote the book for.
All right, yeah, because I know, like I said, I do, there was time when I was doing readings for people, but it just, I was doing it just out of the kindness of my heart. Like I said, it was more focused on everybody else and not myself. And it took that time to realize, okay, I got to step back for a moment, focus on what I need to get done for me first, and then I can move forward and helping other people. Of course, people said, well, why don't you charge for your reading? And I've always had that thought of charging for doing a reading. It's like, okay, well, then that person could come back and say, well, they did it just for the money. It was that whole victim mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because a lot of people are hesitant to charge money for their healing work. And it's really interesting. I get some emails from, angry emails sometimes from people saying, quantum touch should be free because, you're basically, all the energy comes from God or source or all that is. So how come you're charging for the energy when it's divine energy? And I can't tell you how many angry emails I've gotten about that. And my response is, well, we're not charging for love. That would be crazy. Yeah. We're not charging for God, right? We're not controlling the energy or charging people to have access to divine spiritual energy. That's nuts. What we are charging for is the practitioner's time, their training, the session room, the work it takes to get a client or a student. And so, for example, if you go to the produce department at Whole Foods, there's all this produce. And technically, it's free. It grows on trees for free. It's from God, shall we say. But somebody had to pick it. Well, plant the tree, pick the produce, package it up, bring it to the store so you could conveniently shop for it all in one place. And that's what you're paying for. You're not necessarily paying for the divine love that it represents. So I think a lot of people confuse the two, saying, well, you shouldn't charge for the energy. And I think that's where people get into that martyrhood victim thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like I mentioned about, because people will say, like I mentioned about people possibly saying, well, they did it just for the money. That's why I started mentioning that no psychic is ever going to be 100% right. It just ain't going to happen, because then they understand, okay, well, now I kind of get where you're coming from and everything like that, not being 100% right. So it just what I try to do with my show or anything that I talk about is try to open the listening audience or anybody that I talk to eyes to thinking outside the box, to think, okay, you're trained to think this way and you got your opinions, but what if such and such? So a lot of people don't think that way. They're stuck on that one belief, and instead of thinking, okay, what are some of the other possibilities?
I think that's a great point, because beliefs can be right or wrong. What I'm saying right now is just a belief. It's my belief. It's my experience. But ultimately, it may or may not be true. It's just my belief, right? So yeah. I think being open to the idea that your beliefs could shift and your beliefs are fluid and things shift, I think is really important.
Yeah, and of course, being a Wiccan, a lot of people, I've had people say that, well, you're a devil worshiper, or ghost hunting is practice of the devil, or the ghosts or spirits are not real. And I tried to open those people's eyes to, like, with Wiccan, I say, Well, have you ever thought about looking it up and understanding what Wiccan is, and everything like that? Or if they mention like, and it's usually those people I like to call the Bible thumpers, the ones that are stuck on that one opinion that say ghosts and spirits are not real. And I say, well, and like I said, even being Wiccan, I've read the Bible. I understand it. So I say, well, doesn't the Bible say Jesus was the Holy Ghost and Spirit? There's your ghost and spirit right there. I mean, it talks about it in the Bible, but they're not being taught that. They're stuck on that one focus. Now, the point I'm getting to here with this is, do you find that in people that are struggling, they're focused on that one point?
That's a good question. So I have found that people who are struggling are stuck on the victim. They're also stuck in anger. So, because generally the victim and anger go together, and a lot of it is that and I believe a lot of the anger, the unreleased anger from the past, stems from an unwillingness to let things go. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, of course, but for a lot of people that are stuck in the victim thing, it's usually because something really traumatic happened to them in the past, and they feel it was wrong, it was unjust. And so therefore, by hanging on to that anger, it's somehow at some point going to bring justice to the person that wronged them. And then because they're angry, their anger is repelling abundance. And that's been the psychology I've seen a lot. And I was doing it. I was angry about my financial situation. I was angry that I was helping others and not getting a return. I was angry, feeling unappreciated. And that anger was keeping me stuck in struggle.
All right. Now, in your book, is it just a lot of helpful stuff in there, or is it a step-by-step guide?
It's basically a guide to how to shift your energy. So I'm working with beliefs that are stuck with people, and I interweave my story about how do we shift our energy. So it's basically a guide to helping people take ownership. And I deal a lot with that because a lot of people who I've encountered are stuck with their anger or stuck with certain feeling like a victim and are stuck in the past, and how to really take ownership of your money situation. And to me, that's a really big shift, because once you take ownership, it almost just starts to shift on its own at that point. So I deal with that a lot. And then from there, once people take ownership, then I give people step-by-step guides to dealing with what's in the way of attracting more money and what's in the way of overspending, because there's usually either side of the coin. Like, some people bring money in just fine, but tend to, for emotional reasons or other reasons, overspend. Or there's some people that, they live a very frugal lifestyle, but they're not able to bring in much money. And so I deal with both sides of that, and what causes those two energetics.
Yeah, now, of course, I've seen this one thing before where it's like a meme that talked about the rich and the poor, whereas the poor people are spending like $350 on tennis shoes or high-end clothes and stuff like that, where the rich people are spending more. They got the money coming in, but they're more frugal with it. They'll invest that money, not go out and wildly spend it, or on luxury items if they don't have it, but they're investing that money back into themselves and keeping that growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give you an example. There's a manufacturer that makes purses called Coach. These are $500 or more purses, and so what's the appeal of spending $500 on a purse, right? And I thought about this because I used to spend a lot more money on this type of stuff that you're talking about, higher end clothing and things like that, until I realized that I had to ask myself the question, am I spending stuff on things that I really love, or am I trying to impress other people with what I have?
Yeah.
And, so a Coach bag, do I really love Coach bags, or is it that I'm trying to buy it because it has some credibility or a label or some other purpose? And the truth is that I don't love Coach bags, really. They're no different to me than a lot cheaper ones.
Yeah.
So, why am I buying this? So I think that's a bit of soul searching is, what's the real reason we're buying something? And if you absolutely love it, then yes, then that makes sense. Buy it. But if you're buying it for some other reason, I think it's just really good to take a look. Some of us, it's just habit. There may be no particular thing, right? It's just habit.
Yeah, it's like that whole high school thing of being the outsider and trying to impress like the popular girls or the jocks and stuff by buying something or doing something that is not really you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was doing a lot of that, and I have noticed, as you said, a lot of wealthy people, they don't buy this stuff. They don't buy labels. They don't buy fancy stuff. They actually take that money and put it into E-Trade. So, yeah.
Of course, like when back in 2001, I was trying to get into the country music business as a singer-songwriter, and I've met quite a few singers when I lived in Nashville, and one of the last singers I met before I moved out of Nashville to Texas briefly before going back to California was you would think, okay, he's a good singer, he's got all this money, but we ended up actually leaving at the same time, and I'm thinking he has a nice car and everything like that, and he ends up pulling out in this beat up old pickup truck, and I'm thinking, okay, you got the money, you can spend that money on these nicer cars, but you're driving this beat up old pickup truck. But that's where he felt comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels, when you spend money on things that you really love, it actually naturally cuts your expenses because you don't feel this social pressure to conform, right? You can, if you want to drive a beat up, truck, go for it if that's what you like. So if you can, I know when I grew up in a family, there was a lot of concern about what do other people think? What do people think of us? And I know a lot of people have that, I really need to be concerned with that, what other people think about me. And ironically, when I learned how to naturally cut back my expenses, I had to really let go of that whole concern about what other people think. And it's liberating on some level.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Of course, a lot of people think about what other people think about them instead of thinking, what do I think about myself?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Precisely.
that's what is most important. Everybody can say all this stuff about somebody, but until they actually walk in their own shoes, they don't understand it. So you have to look inside yourself and say that what am I doing that is making myself better?
I concur 100%. Well said.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to, because my brain goes 1,000 miles a minute, plus with spirits all around me being a psychic, sometimes it gets hectic. I've learned to shut them off when I'm busy doing like my radio show or something else, because otherwise it gets hectic. But it's just like it's like I gotta focus on what is gonna make me happy and everything like that. Let's see, we got 5 minutes before the break. Let's see, I think we got time for one more question before we go into the break. Now, how do you use the spiritual aspect of this in the book?
So to me, defining what it means to be spiritual, right? I believe that we're not just physical bodies, that life doesn't end when we die, that life continues, that we're actually internal beings, that we're spirits inhabiting the physical form, right? So I believe on some level everything is spiritual energy. So in my book I talk a lot about what is energy, what's spirit, and I believe this energy actually is what the reality is made out of. It's all God stuff. So I use spiritual in multiple ways. One is the fact that everything is spiritual, and the second is for people who are following their passion, living their purpose on a spiritual path, shall we say.
Okay, care to elaborate a little more on that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I believe, given that we're all spiritual beings, that we all come in, we're all incarnate with a life purpose. And that life purpose is written in our heart. It's ingrained. Like for you, your passion is radio. And for me, my passion is energy medicine. It's using energy. So that's just there when we come into this planet. And so when people follow that, they follow their calling. I call that doing their spiritual path, because now they're living what they came here to do. So they're spiritual. They're on their spiritual path.
Yeah, and of course, like for me, I believe in reincarnation and everything like that. Like Wiccans, we believe we go to a place called the Summerland. Whereas people, the Christian faith, say they go to heaven. Some of them think we don't come back from there, just go there and that's it. But I believe that we go to this higher plane of existence, or lower plane if you're the evil kind. But we go there to reflect on what we did in the past life, and then we come back and we don't know anything about the past life unless we do past life regression, but we still have that, our energy, our soul has that mission in life. And I believe one of those missions, or at least for me, at least, I believe I'm on that path to where once I'm done with all my past lives, all the learning, the mission that I was sent here for to learn to do, that once I get cross over into that higher plane of existence, then I'm going to become one of those spirit guides that's going to help other people. And I think I'm getting close to that point, because this life has been more about helping people, whether it's doing it for free or charging, but it's always been about helping others.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's ultimately what we're all here for, is to serve.
Yeah. All right. So we are at the top of the hour, but we'll be back with my guests as we talk more about a book. And of course, in the second hour, we'll have the phone lines open where you, the listeners, can call in and ask my guests a question. Also, in the Spreaker chat is open. Pop in there, chat, say hi, let me know you're listening, and ask a question in there if you want. We'll be right back.
Do you have a talk radio, Facebook Live, or YouTube show and would like guests for your show but don't know where to go to get them? Well, go to radioguestlist.com and sign up today. They have all different experts in different fields, and you can find the ones that are just right for your show. That's radioguestlist.com. Sign up today. It's free.
If you like finding out about different things in the paranormal field, such as ghost stories, haunted locations, UFOs, cryptozoology, and much more, well, check out Into the Paranormal on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Videos are posted once a week. When you click on the banner ad at the top of the Talkin' the Night website for Lola Scarborough, contact her and mention Talkin' the Night. You will receive a 10% off discount code and link for the book, Fighting for Our Tents. And on Friday night, one lucky listener will have a chance to win a hardcover copy of the book. To call into the show, Skype Talkin' the Night, or by phone at 817-717-55. Okay, we cut off. I accidentally cut off the music a little too soon, or the phone numbers to call in, so I hit the wrong button. But if you want to call into the show, the number to call in is by Skype at Talkin' the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. Call in and ask our guests any question, or pop in the Spreaker chat and you can ask your questions there. So we do have questions in the chat room already. How do we raise our energies to match the frequency of things we desire?
That's a wonderful question. So, I believe that if you set an intent, two things will happen. One is you'll get it, which is the most desirable one, or the second one is you'll see what's in the way. So if you want something and yet it doesn't show up, but something negative shows up, you see the universe is demonstrating to you what's in the way. So how to really raise your frequency from this point, and here's one of my favorite techniques, is typically when something negative shows up, we have a really strong emotional response. Like either we get angry or frustrated or sad or depressed or whatever. And the tendency that, and I've done this too, is to try not to feel it. Try not to be sad, try not to be angry. But I have found that that doesn't work very well because that anger is still in our system somewhere. So the best way to raise your frequency is to dive head first into that feeling. So to fully feel whatever it is, your anger or frustration or whatever it is, fully feel it. Feel it till your body's shaking. Feel it till it just like it feels like your heart's going to explode. Just feel it and send it love while you're doing that. Send your anger or whatever is love. And as you do this, the anger is going to start, or whatever the negative feeling is going to start to dissipate, because by sending something love, you're clearing out your heart. You're raising your frequency by eliminating the lower energies that are in the way. And so by doing this, and I use this a lot because sometimes I get angry when I don't get my way, right? Like we all do, right? So if I get angry about something, I get triggered, I dive into it and say, okay, what is this anger trying to show me? Because it's obviously showing me that I'm in the way for what I want. And I dive into it and I feel it. Sometimes I get a picture of where that anger originated, and then I release the past. It's showing me, oh, I need to forgive something that happened in the past. Sometimes it, and sometimes when you feel it, a lot of times you'll get the chain of energy that created it in the first part. So it's about releasing and forgiving what's in the way. And that's, to me, the quickest way to raise your frequency is to dive into what's ever in the way. So I hope that answered the question, but
right.
I do that a lot, yeah.
All right. And, of course, you talked about the past in that answer. So it kind of segues into the next question from the listeners. What is the best way to let go of our past to achieve our goal in money?
That's a fantastic question. So, one of the things that I've noticed is the willingness to let it go, because, and I've done this where I feel like something happened to me that was really bad and it was totally unfair. How dare God do that to me, or whatever, or how dare that happen? So because it was unfair, I hold on to that anger, or I hold on to my feelings of frustration because I somehow want it to be right somehow. I want it to be fair. So I hold on to it in hopes that by holding a grudge or holding on to the negativity, it'll somehow make it fair. And I've seen other people do this. They're holding on to their anger because they feel like it's justified. Like, my anger is justified. I should be angry. So I have found, like, the first thing is just to decide, okay, I'm going to forgive. I'm going to let this go. And that decision is really powerful. And it also means letting go of this idea that it should have been fair. Now, the forgiveness process itself, also, it's my favorite technique is fully diving into the feeling, because you have to spend it like you spend currency. Stuff gets generated in our reality. We attract certain things because we may be holding on to some negative emotion that's attracting a negative experience. So I like to dive into that emotion for the purpose of releasing it. Now, forgiveness doesn't mean that whatever happened is okay. And I think that's where people get confused. They're saying, well, if I forgive it, it somehow makes it okay. That isn't the point of forgiveness. Forgiveness actually releases the energy that attracted the negative experience to us in the first place. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And everything. I'm just trying to figure out how to read this next question, because I think it almost kind of goes in with that last question. And the question is, what is the best way to let go of thinking about money and achieve our high plans of fame without the money? So I guess what he's trying to ask is, how can we not think about the money to kind of help us get the money, or just trying to think of how he wanted to word that.
Okay. I kind of get where you're going with that question. So the first thing is, I don't think it serves us to not think about money, because money is a part of life. So if we just ignore our bank account, I did that. I tried to do that once. I tried to just ignore it, and I noticed that it didn't really help me get out of debt, because ignoring the debt didn't make it go away. It just made it worse, because then ignoring it means I didn't really pay it down. So to me, ignoring money isn't the way to attract more of it. And in fact, what we give attention to is what we create. I'm getting the kind of an intuitive sense with this question that the first thing is to set a goal. So how much money do you want? And I like to baby step goals, because if I set a goal that's too perhaps outside of my belief system, like if I set a goal right now, like I'd like to be a multi-billionaire, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's possible for me. And that's my limiting belief, but I know my limiting belief. So I set a goal of like, I'd like to have an extra $10,000 saved, something that's reasonable that I feel like I can do. And then I feel like then once you have the goal, you get guided to the next thing you need to do to achieve that goal. And it's different for everyone, but ultimately, and I talk a lot about this in my book of how to tap into that guidance so you understand what your next step is. In my case, personally, when I had $35,000 of debt and I had no savings, I was guided on this massive path of simplifying my life because I was spending a lot of money on things that either I forgot I even had or like bills that I just ignored, but that where I was actually paying bills on like an internet service that I had on a house I had vacated 5 years ago. And that was my guidance, but everyone will be different. So setting a goal and then following your guidance, releasing the negativity around it, and certainly don't ignore money. I don't recommend that, actually. Yeah.
All right. So next question is, how do we find and remove our blocks so we can start receiving like the money and everything like that?
This is a juicy one, and I do this every day. So find everything in your life that bothers you. What bothers you in your life right now? What are you triggered by? What are you angry about? Because usually, I think for most people, there's something happens, perhaps on a daily basis that people get upset about. So really pay attention to that and understand, like, why did I get upset? So, for example, if you're angry about somebody's behavior, like, for example, if you feel like you're in a love relationship that's unrequited and you're angry, really look at that energy and saying, okay, I'm angry because I feel like my love life is unrequited. Let's look at that anger. Let's process this anger and let's look at what is this anger telling me? Well, my whole life is a series of unrequited love. Well, that's interesting. Oh, my money is unrequited. I'm doing all this work and not receiving a return. Well, that's interesting. That's my projection. So I went through that rather fast, but those emotions, those negative emotions, your daily, if you're triggered, anytime you're triggered, just pause and look at what's that trigger, what's the origin of that trigger, and that'll give you the clues of what's in the way of what you want.
Yeah, and speaking of like love and relationship and stuff like that, I mean, I've been in plenty of relationships where the woman has either lied or cheated on me, and it doesn't have to be just the woman doing it. It could be a man doing it and stuff like that. But the way I looked at it, that finally I was getting upset because they did this and stuff like that. And I started taking a step back and looking, okay, was it them or was it me? Or was it me or was it them? I did that backwards. And I finally realized that it wasn't me. I was doing everything that I could. It was them. They just were not happy with themselves. And I finally got to that point where I said, I'm not going to let it affect me anymore. If they're going to walk out of my life, there's a whole Medea video that I shared that if you've probably seen it. If they want to walk out of your life, let them.
Let them go. Yeah, totally. And another thing that, comes up for a lot of people is when you start processing your feelings, you'll understand what your judgments are about yourself. Because that's why you attract this stuff in the first place, is because there's a judgment in there about ourselves. So, for example, with the unrequited love, maybe there's a judgment in there that says, I'm not worthy. And that's a whole other thing to unravel. But just looking at whenever you get triggered, what's my story that's causing the upset? So I love that technique because you can get through a lot of blocks really fast. And I love how you said, too, if a person wants to leave your life, it's not about you, and definitely let them.
It doesn't have to be about people. It can be if this is not working for you, let it go. I mean, if, like, say, okay, I for a while I tried freelance graphic design, and I was like, I'm good at it, but it's not what I want to do. I gotta just let it go.
And that can affect your money. So, for example, if you hate where you live, take a look at that. Like, if your place annoys you, I've lived in places that have annoyed me before, and every day I get triggered by like the dog or something, and I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm annoyed by where I live. Why? And I trace it back to, I'm not on the right path with this, and I'm spending money on something. I'm spending money on housing. I don't even like where I live. So looking at letting go of things you're spending money on that you don't even like. And for me, sometimes housing can get that way. Like, oh, I'm spending $2,500 a month on this place I don't even like. So looking at what you don't like in your life, especially if you're putting money into it, I just think that can give you a lot of interesting clues.
Yeah, like with me, like I said, I was born and raised out in California, but that whole fast pace of life that's out there was just not me. I'm more the quiet, laid back, out in the country type of person where I can focus on myself. And of course, being Wiccan, I love nature and everything like that. So that's where I feel most comfortable, where I feel at home.
And interesting enough, you saved money by doing that as well, because you left a higher rent district. You moved out to a place where the cost of living is a little less, and you found something that you left something that didn't work, and you moved into something that works, and you save money. And I think that happens a lot, where we leave something that doesn't work, and we save money by getting into something that really does work, that's really authentic for us. I've noticed that a lot in my life. So.
All right, so we got another question here. Would it be better to say or write down the positive acclamations?
I believe that affirmations are wonderful as a way to set intent, and but they're not sufficient all the time to attract what you want. So this is where I have been talking about taking that deeper cut. So yeah, I think it's great to say, write yourself a check for $1 million. So you can visualize what you want. But then once you put that out there, look around your reality for what's in the way. And you can find what's in the way you get all the clues that are in the way by things that you get triggered by, new situations where you may have a negative response to. All of these are the reality showing you clues of what's in the way. So I think having that intent, doing that positive affirmation is wonderful, but also keeping an eye out for like what you get triggered by, what's in the way, what doesn't feel good, because those are really important clues to your blocks.
Okay. Yeah, because I know, let's see, I'm just trying to find it. Like you mentioned about the anger and stuff like that. One of my guests commented on that, because not so much the anger, but it was more upsetting than anything. She goes, my main thing now is she lost her dad from brain cancer, which made her upset. And of course, that is just, I mean, if you dwell on the past, then you're bound to repeat it. Whereas you learn from it, then you're going to grow.
I'm so sorry to hear about her dad. I mean, that's devastating. That's really hard. Mm-hmm. And I believe that when you're dealt something like that, to let yourself fully feel the grief. So many of us, I think, especially in the spiritual communities, are shy away from that sometimes, but it's really important to just fully dive into the grief, and then when you're ready, to let it go. And yeah. I think that's just as important, but I don't believe in shortchanging yourself the ability to fully dive into the feelings either. So it's finding like what's right for you there. But I know a lot of people too that just they hang on to it for years and they get stuck there. And that's something to really look at too. Like if you're stuck there, it may be time to let it go.
Okay, yeah, because, I mean, my parents have been gone, or at least my dad's been gone for, like, next year it'll be 10 years for him, and my mom 5 years. And, I mean, everybody's going to grieve, but over time, you got to think, okay, it's time for me to move on. That was there. They still hold a place in my heart, but I gotta move on with my life, because if I'm stuck thinking about that, that's where I'm always gonna be. And of course, where I'm going with this is if we stick on our thought of like thinking about money, trying to live in our purpose and everything. If we stick to what we do now, living paycheck to paycheck or struggling, and just focus on that rather than trying to move forward, that's where we're always going to be.
Well, the living paycheck to paycheck thing, first of all, sometimes I've found that people, their goal is just to survive. And I've run across people that said, well, I just need to make it. And I was doing that too. I was just trying to survive, and that was my goal. And then, because I never really had a different perspective of, wow, what if my money worked for me? Or what if I didn't have to just survive? What if I could save money and have a savings account? This was all like new to me. And so the first step of getting out of that was changing my goal, saying, all right, living paycheck to paycheck is no longer a good goal for me anymore. I want to save $3,000 a month or whatever it is, for you. So once I changed my goal, then things started to shift as well. So I think just setting your goal differently may be a part of that.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I'm still at that point where I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. I'm still struggling, but I do have that goal in mind to where I want to get to that point, but I know that it's going to take time to get there. It's just a matter of setting my mindset. This is what I want to achieve, but how do I get there?
I think the first step is I like specific goals. So, I like very specific, like sometimes I have a week with the business where I set the goal of like this week our business needs to bring in, $25,000 for the week. I set a goal like that or something along those lines, or I'd like to have 100,000 in my savings account by a certain date. When you have those goals, then I feel like the next step appears. So, and to be on the lookout for, and it appears in two ways. One, you get a very inspired action step. Like you feel really inspired to do something. And that I feel like is spirit saying that's inspired action. And that's wonderful. That's a great step. And following that inspired action. Or something really bad happens, what we would judge as bad. And that's really the next step as well. It just looks different. And really that next step is showing you this is in the way. So one or the other will happen, the inspired action or the bad thing that shows you something you need to process and release. Either one is good. Like I gave the example earlier, when I set the goal to triple our business, something really bad happened. It slowed down. And I'm like, holy tamales, what is this? And it was really like, a lesson that I need to learn to reach my goal. And so I think really being aware of what's showing up when you set a goal is really important.
All right. Yeah. Now, of course, we had a question about reincarnation, but I told the person that's not really what we're talking about here, so I'll explain that later. But We got another question here because it kind of ties into what you were just talking about. Is how when you mentioned about sometimes we get that block in our way rather than what we really wanted. And the question is, how do we know if we're on the right path?
Okay, so this is a great question. There's multiple ways to determine that. One is how you feel. So if you feel inspired by what you're doing, and if you feel inspired by the action steps you're taking to achieve your goal, then you're on the right path. Like it just has this, you have this joy in your heart around what you're doing. And to me, that's you're on the right path. Also, there's a sense of flow to it, that things are magically showing up to kind of bring your path along. And that's part of the fun for me, because when I'm on the right path, things just, people show up to help me. And it's really amazing. People show up, coaches show up. I get all this help, so I know it's flowing. So that sense of inspiration, that sense of flow are really two big indicators you're on the right path.
Okay. Let's see. The questions slow down here in the chat room. So let's see. Because I got plenty of questions that I can go to. I didn't think the questions were going to slow down right away, so I didn't plan on. and that brings up a great question, is when things, you mentioned about your business slowing down, how do we get back on track from something like that?
So really, the question I ask when something that I don't like happens is, what's the lesson? What's the opportunity? And then I listen for guidance at that point about where the opportunity is to shift. And a lot of times I get a very strong, inspired action step from that. So, when my business slowed down, I got a very strong, inspired action step that, yes, I need to help our instructors grow their businesses. And that just became super clear. And I followed that action step. So a lot of times asking the universe, like, what is the opportunity here? I feel like you always get an answer, and it feels like you'll feel some inspiration around it.
Okay. Just typing something in the chat room real quick. Now I did have another question here. How can one transform their finances without feeling deprived or denying themselves of like the little luxuries in life? Like, say, I like doing things like going out to concerts or something like that, or going out having fun. But if you're living those paycheck to paychecks, how do you get past that and not go out and do this? Or just trying to think of how to put this, but how we get past the feeling deprived of not going out to experience these little luxuries.
Little luxuries. So here's been my experience. We all bring in a certain amount of money, and then we all spend a certain amount of money. And financial abundance happens when you bring in more money than you spend, on a very basic level. So for me, I zeroed in on where I was spending money and made a realization that there were things I was spending money on that I didn't love. There were a lot of things I was spending money on that I didn't love. So I was overspending, but not in a way where I was spending money on what I wanted to spend money on. I was investing in things that really didn't have a lot of meaning to me. And part of that was my housing. I was overspending on housing, and I didn't love my housing. So even looking at your big expenses and saying, okay, I'm putting out this amount of money for a house or for an apartment. Do I love where I live? Yeah. And if you don't love everything you're spending money on, then really look at why. And it sometimes made me ask the bigger questions, the harder questions of perhaps I don't need a big place, or perhaps I don't want to be living in California anymore, or perhaps, some of those more difficult questions. And everyone's situation is different, but I even went through this. I took my bank statement and made little X's by everything that I loved that I was spending money on. So, you get your credit card statement, you have like 200 transactions or whatever, just like, looking through every line and saying, did I love this or did I spend money on it? Did I love this or just spend money on it? And I noticed that there was a very few things I actually loved on that bank statement or my credit card bill. And it was really interesting to look at that. And so that's how I feel like you don't have to feel deprived, because when you actually eliminate what you don't love, you have a lot of extra cash going on. And that's yeah.
All right, so we're at the last commercial break of the night, but we'll get more into my guest Jennifer's book, Spiritual and Broke, as soon as we come back. Also with more of your phone calls or questions in the chat. We'll be right back.
I know all the pain, yeah, and some of the glory. I don't understand life, or why it's so boring. I lay in my bed, yeah, for too long at times. I miss where your head, yeah, where it used to lie. Why am I so fixated? Why am I still hesitating? Why is everything devastating and escalating? Oh man, I hate it, but I won't let it hold me back. No, I won't let it hold me back. I could do it, I never hold back, never give in to it, no. I've been feeling hella bad, and I'm sad, right, but I never look back.
For a limited time only, get 70% off a digital version of Creation Abomination when you click on the banner ad at the top of the Talk in the Night website and mention Talk in the Night. Also, if you click on the Goodreads link beside Alan Thompson's picture on the Guest of the Show page on the show's website, you will be entered into a contest where you could win a free digital copy of his book. Only 100 are be given away. This Christmas, pick up a copy of Lloyd Champion's book, bringing the paranormal field out of the dark ages for just $2.99 on Kindle, or purchase the paperback for just $9.99 when you click on the banner ad at the top of the Talk of the Night website. Also, this Friday during open lines, you have a chance to win a free Kindle copy of the book. By clicking on the Spiritual and Broke banner ad at the top of the Talk in the Night website and you sign up on Jennifer Noel Taylor's website, you will get the first 3 chapters of her new book, Spiritual and Broke. And this Friday, one lucky listener will have the chance to win a free copy of her new book when it comes out, as well as her other book, Love Incorporated. To the show, Skype Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. Okay, and we're in the last segment of the show. So if you guys got any questions for my listeners, you can call into the show by Skype at Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. Also, if you sign up for a free account on Spreaker, pop in the chat, say hi, let me know you're listening, and feel free to ask a question of my guests. Keep those great questions coming because I'm loving them, my guest is loving them. So let's get back into your book and everything like that. Now, we've all heard the saying, why does bad things happen to good people? What is the real reason behind that?
That's a really juicy question. So I believe that because the reality is all energy, I believe that the law of attraction is a universal law, meaning that bad things just don't just happen. We create every experience in our life. And so I'll go back to the example of if, let's say, we want to manifest money or a relationship or whatever, the universe gives us two things. Either it gives us what we want or it shows us what's in the way. And so we are generating our reality as a tool to learn about ourselves and to learn what our beliefs are and who we really are and our energy and essence. It's here for our spiritual growth. So bad things don't just happen. We are actually creating our experience.
Okay, that's a great answer. When somebody has a calling, like I have a calling to do radio and help people through my voice and bringing other guests to bring on different points of views, how do we follow that without having to worry about where the money is going to come from to make ends meet?
So if you feel that something's there in your heart and you know it and you know it's your calling, I believe that you will receive inspired action to actually go pursue your calling. Now, a lot of times that inspired action may be something like keeping your current day job and doing your true calling at night. Or maybe the inspired action would be working for another year at your day job, saving money, and then pursuing what you love. Everyone's different, and everyone will know what that answer is for them. But I don't believe your inspired action would ever lead you to a situation, if you're really following your inspired action, where you're going to be really struggling. To me, that's just when your negative stuff comes up. So just listening to the clues of the universe of what that inspired action is for your next step.
All right, so another listener question. Should we ask for specific things? And if so, would we get what we asked for? And now I know you mentioned sometimes we get that block rather than what we're looking for.
I believe in being specific when you set an intent. So if I said something like, I want a lot of money, I feel like that's really ambiguous. But if I said something like, I need to generate $20,000 this week for our business, that's very specific. And I've noticed that when I've been specific, I got exactly what I asked for when I was being specific. Now, sometimes if we're specific and we get what we want, we realize that we weren't accurate on what we wanted, and that's a whole different thing. But I believe in being specific.
Okay. Now, actually, I got another question from listeners and everything like that. And it actually kind of brings up a thought in my mind, but I'll get into that in a second. The question is, I have a good question. Why do we have money? There's always problems with that and stuff like that. Like people say money's the root of all evil or something like that. But if we, and of course I'm a big history buff, so I like learning about history stuff as well. And there was a time that in this nation that we actually bartered for, and even back in ancient Europe and everything like that, where a lot of things were not money wise, it was bartered with and everything like that.
Well, I feel like I've had friends ask me a question like this because they don't like money. They believe the money is the root of all evil, or they feel that people who have a lot of money are greedy people. So I've noticed that a lot of people ask this question when they have a charge about money itself. They either believe that wealthy people are greedy or wealthy people are bad, or money itself is evil, or you can't have money and be spiritual, some kind of dislike of money. And the thing is, if you're broke and you don't like money, it's really hard to attract money. So I think really processing any kind of negative feelings about either wealthy people or money or both, or the corporate environment or whatever it is that you don't like about money, I think is really important. I know I used to believe that you couldn't help people or you weren't a spiritual person if you had money. And so clearly I believe poverty was better, and I kind of lived paycheck to paycheck because that's, I believe, how it should be if you're trying to help others. So it's really looking at your feelings about money itself and seeing if you have any kind of negative charge about it, or your feelings about wealthy people as well, and releasing any kind of negative charge you may have.
Okay, now does it work with anything? I mean, the whole teaching and this whole book, does it help with anything else other than like money? Like a question from my listener, that they would like to have a car to get around town. Would using that same principle help in doing something like that?
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, my book is geared towards working with the energy of money, but really I'm talking about how do we attract anything into our lives. So it can apply to a car or a relationship or whatever it is. But yeah, so basically I'm teaching people how do you work with this energy behind everything in life to become a match for what you want.
All right. Let's see. Questions are coming in again. Do you believe in a future where we will not need money, such as like Star Trek and stuff like that? Do you think that we'll ever reach a point in our life of something like that?
That's a really good question. I think that we're always going to have a medium for exchange, a way to barter, to exchange goods. Whether it involves the current format of money, I'm not sure. But I think we're always going to have some kind of medium of exchange.
Okay, yeah, because, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, that back in the Old West, or, I mean, there was still that money, even in Europe, but there was also, I'll give you this for that. And I think over time we've forgotten that way of life, where it's all about money or credit cards or something like that, and we're focused on that point rather than trying to help other people.
One of the things that I think I'd like to emphasize is that when you have more money, you can help other people more. So when you are able to fund your mission, you're able to get out to the world more. When you have more money, you can help more homeless people. You have the funding to do so. So just a thought I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, it's a great thought. Now, let's see. Now, can visualization help in manifesting, or along with the intent and everything like that, help you attract like money and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think intent and visualizing what you want and getting really clear on what you want is really important. But it's not the whole tamale. As I said, yeah, there's other stuff involved as we've been talking about. But I think if you don't have a goal or you don't have a clear idea of what you really want, then I don't think you can manifest much because you don't have an intent. So I think intent's really important.
All right. So we're slowly running out of time here. So I wanted to get into a couple other things, and people can keep those questions coming. But I wanted to ask you about if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your other book, Love Incorporated.
So I wrote Love Incorporated a couple years ago, and it's up on Amazon right now. It basically is helps people connect to their guidance system, and it espouses my philosophy on where, how we're all energy and what the interface is between spirit and matter, and then how to connect to your guidance. And the readers that have read it said it helped them tap into their inner wisdom and their guidance system.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get to something here real quick on it, just because I didn't have any more thought into that. But the kind of like the subtitle for it, and darn it, it didn't load up like I wanted it to. The business of doing what you love. I mean, is it kind of like take it? I'm just trying to figure out how to word this, but basically, do because you've heard the old saying, "Do what you love, and you'll never have to work a day in your life." Is that kind of the premise that you were kind of going there?
I think that's really well said. Yeah, it's basically how to tap into figuring out what you love and getting into and understanding your life purpose, and tapping into that guidance system that we all have that tells us our life purpose. And so that was the intent of that book.
All right. Now, care to tell people a little bit about your newsletter that you send out on your website?
So my website, I basically right now, if you sign up for my mailing list, I'm sending out the first 3 chapters of my new book for free. And then I'm just, once in a while I send out an announcement, but I will send out an announcement when the book's actually available. And but I haven't been doing like weekly. I won't bombard you with a whole bunch of stuff. Basically, that's not my style.
The same thing with my newsletter. When I get it up and running, I'm gonna do it like once a week. It's gonna be not like every hour, like I do with promote my radio show. I do that like several times a day. It's like, why can't I just post once and people get it? But sometimes they don't. So I just end up posting it multiple times just so that people get a chance to see it, because sometimes they might be working at that time or doing something else and they just don't see it until later in the day. So I figure, okay, I'll post it again. They'll eventually see it. But with like my newsletter, it would be coming out once a week. So that's basically what you're doing with the newsletter, is just like maybe once a week or maybe once in a while.
Once in a while right now. Yeah. Once in a while. Yeah.
All right. Now, where can people find information on you and your books?
So basically, you can go to spiritualandbroke.com or jennifernoeltaylor.com, and there's information about myself and my books, and that's where you sign up to get the free first chapters. And thank you.
All right. Yeah, because, I mean, Shoot, I lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. I had a spirit trying to come through, and it's like, shut up! I'm doing a radio show. And like I said, my brain runs 1,000 miles a minute, so when something just jumps in my path like that, it's like, oh, where was I going? So, where can they pick up a copy of the books?
Right now, Love Incorporated is on Amazon. So if you look up Love Incorporated, or if you go to my site, there's a link to it. And then Spiritual and Broke, the publication date is sometime next year. I'm working with the publishers right now on finishing that up. So that will be available early next year. I don't have a date yet, but it's coming up.
Okay, I think it will help a lot of people once it does come out. How can people contact you?
You can go to my website, and there's a link to email me, or you could just do Jennifer@quantumtouch.com, and that's my email address.
All right, and now, of course, you talked about spiritual healing, because we didn't really get into too much of that. We were talking about the books and everything like that. Do you offer some of that stuff on a website, like the classes or anything like that on spiritual healing?
Yeah, so basically, I run a business called Quantum Touch, and it's a energy healing modality, and there's a lot of information about that at quantumtouch.com. And we have about almost 300 instructors around the world, so there's a lot of different classes going around all different locations. And then we have some free information as well, and books and all kinds of stuff. So that's quantumtouch.com.
Okay, and I'll have to get that link from you so I can add it to the show's website, because TJ didn't mention that when he contacted me. So,
oh, okay, no worries.
I'll have to get that from you later. You can send it to me on the Skype chat after the show. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. It was a great pleasure having you go talking over about your books and how to get past this whole mindset of what's holding us back and moving forward.
Yeah, well, thank you. I loved answering all the questions from the listeners, and it sounds like you have a really great listenership, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
And of course, you can, if you want the free first 3 chapters of Jennifer's book, go to talkingthenight.weebly.com, click on the banner ad. It'll take you right to her website where you can sign up and on our website and actually get those first 3 chapters. And hopefully once you read those 3 chapters, then you'll want to buy the book once it does come out. And of course, pick up our other book, Love Incorporated. So again, thank you for coming on the show, Jennifer. It was a pleasure having you on.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for those listening to the show, tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about something really special, something that I did not learn about until I think it was Tuesday night, actually, when my guest for tomorrow night told me about it. She's like, I got something groundbreaking that I want to talk about. And I know she does a lot of spiritual work and investigating with spirits and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, maybe she's got a new location that she wants to talk about or something like that, or a new case. But it turns out this is something that everybody should know about. And I don't want to give away too much of the details, but when you think of organ donation, you think, okay, it's going to help somebody else. But did you realize that when our organs are harvested, that we're not given any anesthesia. So we're basically still alive up until that point of death, but we're not given anesthesia. We're given a parasitic to where we're paralyzed. So believe it or not, after we're dead, our spirit is still remembering that pain that we went through as those organs were harvested. So we'll let my guests get into that tomorrow night, because it's definitely something that everybody should know about and everything like that. And then, of course, Friday night, we got Friday night open lines. I'm going to be giving away some books, I think 3 or 4 different books, if I remember correctly. Let me see here. Just trying to think. I think some of my guests gave away some books for me to give away. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jennifer TJ offered to give a free copy of your book when it comes out, plus Love Incorporated, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to give people a chance to win that, plus the other books that we talked about. So that's what we got coming up on the show the rest of this week. Now, of course, next week I haven't posted any shows for next week because I'm still waiting to hear from the guests, but I also might take next week off just because I need to recharge my batteries. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to just take that step back and recharge. So, again, thank you, Jennifer, for coming on the show. Thank you, listeners, for the great questions. I mean, my guests love the questions from you guys. You come up with the best questions, and I got the best listeners in the world. So, thank you, and let's see here. I'm actually in this a couple minutes early before we're supposed to, like 2 minutes early. So until tomorrow night when we talk about organ donation, I'll see you on the dark side. Good night from Talking the Night.